I was always the quiet and reserved child in my family. Growing up, I was often overlooked and overshadowed by my outgoing siblings. Unfortunately, my dad remarried after my mother's death, and my stepmother, Mara, quickly became a significant part of my life. Mara was tall, slender, and had piercing green eyes. She was always beautifully dressed and impeccably groomed. In the beginning, Mara was kind to me, but as time progressed, she became distant and more hostile. It wasn't long before I noticed that something was off with her. My stepmother would frequently stare at me with an intense gaze, and I could feel chills running down my spine. Whenever I would walk past her, she would mutter something under her breath that sounded like an incantation. I never thought much about it initially, but things started to get more bizarre and frightening over time. One night, I woke up to find myself sweating profusely, and I felt terrifying presences in my room. I tried to get up and turn on the lights, but my body felt like it weighed a ton, and I couldn't move. I could hear whispers and murmurs around me, and I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, and the whispers turned into screams. I screamed, hoping my father or sister would come to my rescue, but no one came. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained, and I was filled with an unexplainable sense of dread. Mara looked at me knowingly and simply said, "I hope you slept well," with a sly smirk on her face. From then on, I made sure to steer clear of my stepmother, but I knew that I needed to confront her as something was seriously off. But who would believe me? My sister thought it was just a matter of me being paranoid, while my father refused to believe that his new wife, whom he loved deeply, was capable of such vile acts. The more I tried to avoid Mara, the worse things got. I began to experience severe headaches and dizziness, and I would often wake up with marks on my arms and legs that looked like scratch marks. My grades began to suffer as I was always tired and could hardly focus. One day, I accidentally stumbled upon a book in my stepmother's closet that detailed several ancient rituals and black magic spells. My heart sank to my stomach as I realized that Mara had been practicing black magic on me. I was desperate and knew that I needed to find a way to protect myself. I reached out to an old family friend who had studied the occult and asked for his help. He suggested that I try performing a protective ritual on myself. I followed his instructions to the letter and performed the ritual late one night when I knew I would be undisturbed. The ritual worked, and I felt an immediate sense of relief. The headaches and dizziness vanished, and the mysterious scratch marks also disappeared. However, it was evident that Mara would not take this lightly. Days passed, and I could feel her resentment towards me growing stronger. One night, I heard her muttering words under her breath again, and the same terrifying presences returned. This time it was more intense, and I saw shadows lurking around my bed. They were whispering once again, and I knew that my stepmother was behind this. I could feel her hatred emanating from every corner of my room. I was powerless and scared, and I knew that I had to get rid of the source of the evil. In a bid to put an end to the black magic rituals, I searched the entire house for Mara's black magic book. To my surprise, I found it hidden deep in one of her drawers. I immediately took the book outside and burned it. I watched as the pages turned to ashes, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Little did I know that this was far from over. The next morning, I found my stepmother dead in her bed, lying amidst a circle of black salt. Her eyes were open, and they were blazing with fury. Initially, I was suspected of killing her, and the authorities found it hard to believe that she had died of natural causes. However, The autopsy revealed that she had died of a heart attack, and there was no evidence of poison or any other lethal substance in her system. Deep down, I knew that this was not a mere coincidence. The ritual that I performed had undoubtedly affected her deeply, and her intent to harm me had backfired. In conclusion, even though the black magic menace is real, I learned that protection was always in my hands. I still shudder at the thought of what my stepmother had been capable of doing to me, but I'm grateful that it's over. However, now I understood the importance of not ignoring strange occurrences that could be linked to dark magic. Dirk had been hired to fix up a very old church that was deep in the woods. The church had not been used in decades, for about 25 years. After closed, a couple that lived close by tended a small graveyard close to the church. They also tended to the church as well. Unfortunately, the couple decided to move to another state about 20 years ago. So the once beautiful church passed from owner to another till new owners decided they would have the church and grounds restored. The newest owners started repairs after buying it 2 years ago. It went well at first, but then strange things started happening. The main reason they stopped repairs is because every week or so supplies would go missing, so it was decided by the owners to have a professional finish the repairs. Dirk didn't really consider himself a professional, but he could fix almost anything. After taking the job, he decided since it was early summer that he would just camp out by the church and rent a hotel room on the weekend. This idea would save tons of money, plus he was warned by the owners about the thefts, so it made even more good sense to camp out close by. Dirk didn't get the whole story of why the church had closed in the first place, but that really didn't matter. He was focused on the job at hand. He had decided it was probably not a great idea to make his camp right next to the church. If a thief or thieves did return, who knows if they were potentially dangerous, so he made his camp about 50 yards away, but he did install a motion-censored camera, and also decided to leave a device that worked just like a baby monitor, but obviously more high-tech, so if he happened to hear noises at the church, he could respond pretty quickly. He had his trusted rifle at the ready. The rifle was a must-have anyhow this far into the woods. He doubted any large predators were in these woods, at least nothing bigger than a bobcat or coyote, but for precaution's sake it was better to prepare it anyhow. His first day of work went quite well, except he felt like he was being observed, a little unnerving but nothing too serious. The one that did concern him though was the sight of a young woman close to the graveyard, maybe just someone visiting dead relatives' grave. That night, after finishing dinner and reading a bit, he decided to call it a night. After a few hours, Dirk was awakened by a sound coming through the monitor. At first he heard a voice, but couldn't make out any words, but then he heard, "Who is out there?" Dirk didn't know what to do. Obviously someone was in the church, but none of the motion sensors were tripped. This realization was a cause for concern, so Dirk decided he would not respond this night. He thought or knew something was malfunctioning with his equipment, so in the morning he would test everything to make sure it was working properly. He didn't entertain any other thoughts on this matter. In a few minutes, Dirk was fast asleep, but after a short while, he was awakened not by the voice monitor, but something was beside him in the tent. He was sleeping on his side, but this presence next to him made him paralyzed with unknown fear. The only sound the presence made was a slight chuckling sound over and over. After a minute or so the thing next to him was gone. The rest of the night was quiet. When Dirk got up the next morning, what happened in the night seemed like a dream. That morning he tested all his equipment, but nothing was wrong, everything was working fine. Later that day, when he was coming down from the ladder, he noticed writing on 3 different windows. The windows were absolutely filthy, so the writing in the dirt was very legible. "Please leave here before it won't let you leave." Dirk was stunned and very scared. Even more frightening, the writing was on the inside. That's when Dirk saw the young woman again by the graveyard. This time Dirk decided to go and talk with her. For the next 9 weeks Dirk had a routine, only broken every few days when he went into town to get supplies. He never once rented that hotel room. People in town were growing concerned about Dirk's strange behavior, but he wasn't bothering anyone, so they let him be. Dirk was doing his work, but a little less each day, so he could spend his time with his new friend Emily. Each day they would go on long walks in the woods, and each day Emily would tell Dirk long stories. At night Emily would disappear, but each night Dirk would be visited by the presence, and each night it would stay a bit longer. Each night Dirk would hear a voice in the monitor, but he just ignored it. He never once went up to the church at night, at least not yet. One day Emily told Dirk she wanted him to meet her family. This made Dirk nervous. He was 29 years old, but this request made him feel like he's 15 again. That night the voice in monitor spoke. "Come to the church. We have Emily." Then silence. Dirk immediately reacted. He reached for his rifle, but it was gone. Then from behind him he felt the presence again. Chuckling, it had never uttered one word, but this night it spoke. "Don't go." But go Dirk did. As he reached the church 10 feet from the door he realized his mistake too late. The front doors opened and the last thing Dirk heard was a clicking sound. The next day Dirk joined Emily and he got to meet her family. That afternoon a county deputy found Dirk. At the entrance of the church the deputy saw a rifle. Nobody understands what happened at that church, but nobody through the generations can explain anything that happened at that church. I am alone, lost, and trapped in my own house. The once peaceful abode, now haunted with scary apparitions, is a consequence of the black magic done by my stepmother, who seems to have taken over everything once I moved back to town after graduating from college. It is as though she never wanted me back home and has been fueling her resentment with dark and sinister spells ever since. My father had remarried after my mother's death, and I had long accepted my stepmother as family. Even though my father had passed away shortly after my graduation, I knew that my stepmother would take care of me. Little did I realize that she harbors a deep and dangerous resentment towards me and had always resented my mother for taking away her chance at being Mrs. Hargrove. My father had always been her ticket to a life of luxury, but with the arrival of a new wife, my mother, she was forced to watch from the sidelines. And after my mother's death, she finally had her chance at grabbing hold of my father, but things did not go as planned. My stepmother, who is an expert in the dark arts of witchcraft and black magic, could not bear the idea of me coming back home, and she knew that she had to do something drastic. She had always been jealous of my academic success, my social life, and my good looks, and her jealousy had slowly turned into hatred. It started with minor occurrences. I would find my clothes ripped or with strange stains, or my things would go missing. Then it escalated to strange noises in the night, whispers, and strange smells. I realized that something was wrong, but I never could have guessed that it was my own stepmother who was behind it all. One night, I had come back home late from a friend's party, and as I was about to reach my room, I saw my stepmother standing outside my door. She was staring at me with an expression that sent a chill down my spine. I knew something was wrong. The door swung open, and she grabbed me by the arm, pulling me into my room. She was more aggressive and twisted than I had ever seen her before, and I knew that this was certainly not the nurturing and caring stepmother I had grown up with. She started cursing me, calling me all sorts of names, and blaming me for everything that had gone wrong in her life. At first, I was speechless, but then I saw a strange glint in her eye, and I knew that she had reprised the dark arts of black magic. I tried to scream, but my voice was choked in my throat. She had cast a spell on me, and I was unable to move or speak. I could only watch in horror as she began to chant strange incantations over me, pulling strange material from her pockets and muttering curses that I could not understand. Finally, after an eternity of shivering under her gaze, her ritual was complete, and she left me alone in the room. I was finally able to move, but I realized that I felt different. Something had changed in me. There was a darkness inside of me that wasn't there before. Over the next few days, everything around me started to change. The once beautiful and serene garden became overgrown with weeds and thorns. The sky outside was no longer bright and sunny, but always gray and cloudy. Every time I left my room, I could feel a chill in my bones, and my body felt heavy and lethargic. The worst part was the stranger apparitions that started to visit me in the night. At first, I thought they were simply nightmares, but as their frequency increased, I started to realize that this was no ordinary dream. They would come sneaking into my room, their red eyes staring into mine as they whispered horrible secrets and threats. I tried to talk to my stepmother about what was happening, but she would always feign innocence, telling me that I was imagining things and that everything was just in my head. But I knew that she was lying, and I knew that she was behind all of this. I made the decision to move out of the house and away from my stepmother's grip, hoping that it would make things better for me. But even after I had moved out, the horrors continued. The apparitions would still come and visit me, and the sense of dread never left me. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I took to researching the dark arts and witchcraft to see if there was some way to reverse the curse she had put on me. It was only then that I realized the extent of her power and the danger I was in. My stepmother was one of the most powerful and dangerous witches I had ever read about. Her power was so strong that most of the spells she had cast couldn't possibly be reversed. She had cursed me with an ancient ritual that had bound my soul to hers with black.